Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about some more basic stuff in Maya. That's good to know before you get into the more complicated, higher end stuff. And in this video in particular, we're going to deal with duplicating and pivot points. Okay, so let's tackle pivot points first. If I get cylinder, like so, let me just scale this up. There. So every object that you have has a pivot point. One way of thinking about a pivot point is it's your object's center of gravity. The other way of thinking about it is it's that point at which you pick something up, right? So again, every object has one and only one. Okay, every object has one pivot point only. I mentioned in a previous video, grouping gives you a second pivot point. So if I were to select this object and press Ctrl G, so I have a group and I have the cylinder. So I can move this out and the group pivot point is still here. So you need this for some things, in animation and rigging, actually. You might need to have multiple levels with uh, different pivot points. So that's one thing. One object, one pivot point, but you can sort of have another one by grouping it. So I'm going to get that out. Just delete the group for now, right? So let me duplicate this and show you what having different pivot points can do. First of all, how do you move a pivot point? Simple. You press D, right? Or the insert key. If you're on a Mac, I'm not sure if insert works, but D works for sure. So if I have this now and I press D, watch what happens. The manipulator changes. You get these like miniature arcs around there. That means you're in pivot mode. So I can move this up like that. And if I select this one, I can move this out. So a pivot point that's outside of an object is completely valid. There's no issue with that. Okay, so I can move this. I can move that. No biggie, no change. However, if I start to rotate things, watch what happens. The pivot point's over here, and it rotates like this. This guy's pivot point is up there, and it rotates like that. This guy's pivot points is way up there, and the rotation is like so. Same thing with scale. Remember, objects always scale to and from the pivot point. Okay? So, for example, if you had a door, right, you would most probably put your pivot point somewhere here. So you would hinge your door like that instead of like having it in the middle where your door would go like this. So how do you reset your pivot point? If you go to modify, center pivot, that will center your pivot point. It's not exactly a resetting, but it will bring your pivot point to the center of your object. What I mean by that is if I make a change to this, for example, I edit this like that. Going to modify center pivot, where are you? There you are. Will not bring it back to where it was. It will bring it to the center of this new shape of the object, which is over here. So that's the closest thing to a reset you can get. Now, about duplicating, let's get our cube. So, and yeah, division height, like so. Now, I can duplicate this simply by pressing Control D, okay? And then moving the duplicate out. A lot of people at the beginning find this a bit weird, but once you know about it, it's fine. If you select an object, you press Control D, look at my outliner, a new object is created, but it's created right on top of the original one. So some people think, hey, nothing happened. But actually, it's right there. You just move it off to one side. And every time I hit Control D, I can just do that and so on. Okay. Now, you have other options when you're duplicating, and this is sort of filed under duplicate special. So if I go to edit, you can see here duplicate, Control D. You have duplicate special, okay, Control Shift D. Now, if you click on the option box, it'll open up your options. And then here you can change certain things about how you duplicate. For example, first off, you have geometry type. So you have a copy or an instance. By default, Control D just gives you copies. And what is a copy? A copy is an independent duplicate. So I can make edits to the duplicates and not affect any other, like that. An instance, however, is a duplicate that still shares a connection to the original. Okay, so I can hit apply and then move the duplicate out like so. And watch if I select the vertex. Once I make a change, the original changes as well. And that's both ways. I can select the original and the instance will update. This is really, really useful if you have a lot of something that you think in the future you might have to edit. So, for example, if you're doing, like 150 seats for a theater, okay, and the seats might not be approved yet, but you need to start on them. So you have them, you can duplicate them with as an instance. And then if, changes are made, let's say the armrest needs to be wider or the backrest needs to be higher, you can pick any one of those chairs, make your edit, and all the others will update. No problem. The next thing about duplicate special is smart transform. So by default, that's off. I I like to keep it on. And what smart transform does is it will remember whatever transformation you applied as long as you haven't deselected. So if I select this one and I hit duplicate special, I can move this like so. And remember, our shortcut for duplicate special is Control Shift D. Okay. So as long as I haven't deselected this object, if I hit Control Shift D, it duplicates and moves the exact same amount. And remember, these are all instances, so I can just grab one and make an edit. Okay. But now that I've deselected, Smart Transform is inactive. The next time I use Smart Transform, it'll remember whatever transform I did for that, like so. Okay. And if you combine this with pivot points, you can get some interesting results. So Again, back to our cube, right? Okay, so our pivot point is there. If I hit Control Shift D, I can move it forward and rotate it, let's say 10 degrees. If I hit Control Shift D, okay, you can get an interesting abstract pattern that way, right? I can grab this. Let's bring its pivot point down here and Control Shift D, forward, rotate slightly. You get a different pattern. Lots of things you can do. So you can try scaling. So I can move this forward, scale it slightly. There you go. I can, for example, have like a pillar, something. So if I bring my grid back on, I can move this out and I can move the pivot point back to my origin. Remember, if I press X, I can snap. That works for pivot points as well. So I'm snapping to the grid point. And now if I hit Control Shift D, I can rotate this, let's say 30 degrees. And as long as I don't deselect, I can make myself an arc of columns like so. So yeah, that is basically duplicating and pivot points in a nutshell. Thanks for watching. See you guys soon.